Hi guys, it's James here. Just basically this is a video to summarise my James Bond marathon, ultimate James Bond marathon that I've done over the last few days, over this weekend. I started on 27th of December, which was a Friday, and finished last night actually at midnight, Sunday the 29th. So today is Monday the 30th of December, and after about 14 hours sleep, I'm a bit more awake now than I was last night when I finished the marathon. So I have had time to reflect and to think about some of the best moments of the marathon, and just basically thinking about the films and the progression of the films over 50 years. So I started at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon with Everything or Nothing, Stephen Riley's excellent James Bond documentary, which I was lucky enough to see in the cinema when it was released a few weeks before Skyfall last October 2012. It's a great documentary, very insightful, of particular note for me when I was watching it. Something that I was moved by was Barbara Broccoli sort of revealing how when Cubby was just before Cubby died, Sean Connery rang him and actually thanked him because there was lots of ill feeling between Sean Connery and the producers Cubby and Harry while they were making some of Sean's films, particularly his later ones, which of course was one of the big reasons why Sean decided to leave after You Only Live Twice. But he returned with Diamonds Are Forever, as we know, and the feelings were a little bit better. But in a later interview, a television host asked Sean Connery who played the first James Bond villain, and he said Cubby Broccoli, and it's quite a nasty comment to make. I think Sean's the type of mentality is somebody that holds a grudge for a long time. But of course, Bond made Sean Connery, really. He was nothing before James Bond, and if you look at him now, everybody knows who Sean Connery is, and he's still regarded as the best of the Bonds. So we started with Everything or Nothing, then I watched the American Climax Casino Royale from American TV. It's just under an hour, very short, and they basically butcher Ian Fleming's novel, and Ian Fleming was notedly very unhappy that the Americans sort of got their hands on his baby and basically made a mess of it. And that was first released on American TV on the 21st of October 1954. So basically about 8 years before the official film series began. So Cubby and Harry got their deal in 1961, and then 1962 in October, 5th of October, was the premiere of Dr. No, the first Bond film, and watching it is great. It's still a brilliant film even 50 years on, and with the restoration, as I said in my earlier review, it looks amazing still. The picture quality is great. There's a few little problems in terms of special effects, but for early 1960s it looks very good indeed. The next one is probably my favourite, From Russia With Love. It's certainly the best of the Sean Connery ones and the best of the earlier Bond films. It's a very tight story, really engaging, and some great character actors in there as well. Lotte Lenya, who plays Rosa Klebb, is brilliant. Also Robert Shaw, of course, who plays Donald Grant, and the menace in the character. He hardly says anything for the whole of the film, and he's in it for short intervals, basically lurking in the shadows until Bond is tricked by him. So in some ways he's the ultimate villain, really. He's the ultimate creeping menace of a villain. The next one was Goldfinger, and it surprised me actually, because Goldfinger is always regarded as the finest, the classic James Bond film. And while it is a classic, there are still lots of classic elements. It just doesn't hold up as well as the first two, in my opinion. It's if you take the classic moments away, of which there are some in different places, it's just a very run-of-the-mill film. And I can say that as well for Thunderball and You Only Live Twice, really. Those three films in a row were a bit boring to watch, to be honest. Lots of gadgets, lots of lots of nonsense, really. It was a shame. But then we move on to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So the big regret here is that it was George Lazenby's only James Bond film. He should have come back for more, and it's a shame that agents and friends talked him out of it, because he was willing to go back and, you know, renegotiate a deal for more, to star in more James Bond films, and he would have been great. I think people would have taken to him more as Bond and would have accepted the fact that he was a good James Bond, because he was. He wasn't an actor before starring in this film. He hadn't acted in anything. He was an Australian model for a chocolate television commercial. But he does really well in the film. He has Diana Rigg, who's superb to work off of, who obviously plays Mrs. Bond. And of course it's got the end to end all James Bond films with the death of Tracy, which is just a really poignant moment and one of the standout moments in the Bond series. So from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is now in my top 5 Bond films, to Diamonds Are Forever, which will always be at the bottom of the pile for me. It was just a wasted opportunity, really bad. Why they got Sean Connery back to do it, I don't really know. I think because they were worried about the future of Bond and the fact that George Lazenby's film hadn't done as well as the first 5 Sean Connerys, they decided, right, we'll pay Sean Connery some more money and get him to return for another film. But he had agreed it was just for one more film, so they were still looking again for another James Bond, and they found him. TV's The Saint became James Bond. Roger Moore, who was originally suggested as the first James Bond before Sean Connery came into the mix. So Roger Moore is the longest serving James Bond, and his films are very much tongue-in-cheek. Live and Let Die is a good start for him. Good themes in that one, and the fact that the more roles for black actors is nice to see as well. It's around the same sort of time as blaxploitation and the KKK, so it's very it's a zeitgeist film, very much. Live and Let Die from 1973. Man with the Golden Gun, the problem was the story and it's a bit stupid, really. You've got very silly characters like Miss Goodnight and Knick Knack as well, but also the fact that the film was released literally a year and a half after Live and Let Die, in Christmas 1974, which they needed longer to make a decent second Bond film for Roger Moore. But thankfully, film number 10, after the separation of Cubby and Harry as the producers, Cubby was the sole producer, Cubby Broccoli, of the Bond series from The Spy Who Loved Me onwards, and he created a great comeback film for the 15th anniversary in 1977. The next film was supposed to be For Your Eyes Only. It says at the end of Spy Who Loved Me, James Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only, and that would have been great, but of course George Lucas came along with Star Wars in the same year as The Spy Who Loved Me in 1977, so it's a good opportunity in 1979 to release Moonraker, so they sent Bond into outer space. Some of the effects are good for the time, but it's still one of the weaker James Bond films in my opinion. For Your Eyes Only, probably the best performance by Roger Moore in the series, I think. It's a kind of three-way split between The Spy Who Loved Me, For Your Eyes Only and Octopussy as his best performance, I think. But For Your Eyes Only, very good film, back to basics, good characters. Julian Glover plays a good villain. The only real negative point is Lynn Holly Johnson, who plays BB, but apart from that, it's a good film. Octopussy was a big surprise for me. I hadn't watched it for a while before this marathon, and it's good fun. It's a very entertaining film, and setting Bond, taking him to India is hasn't been done before in Bond, and I don't think it's been done since Octopussy either. So Bond needs to go back to India. It's a great culture, and so different from what you expect in James Bond. Some good characters in there as well. Louis Jourdan plays Kamal Khan really well as well, a good villain. So the last of the Roger Moore films, A View to a Kill, it's widely regarded as the weakest one of his and one of the weakest of the Bond films. And yeah, in many respects it is. Some of the stunt work, you can tell so obviously that it's not Roger Moore, that it's a bit of a joke, to be honest. And he does look very old in this. The thing that I remember from doing this first time round with my mate Sean was we just laughed at all of the moments where Roger Moore makes an old man noise. He basically should be going around with a Zimmer frame, because he's approaching 60 and he looks it on the screen. That said, the film's quite entertaining. Christopher Walken, the first time in Bond that you get basically an Oscar-nominated actor playing a James Bond villain, which is pretty cool. So that's the end of the Roger Moore era. Move on to Timothy Dalton, the best James Bond in my opinion. The two films that he did, again, the big regret is that he should have done more, and the problems with MGM and the finance of the studios was a big factor for Timothy Dalton basically turning the role down for a third film. But he was signed to do a third James Bond film. It's just such a shame that he didn't get to do it. So 1987's The Living Daylights, good film, great introduction for him. Shame about the villains in that film, they're a bit non-existent. License to Kill, one of my favourites, again in my top 5. Never used to like it as much, but it's a very good film. James Bond goes rogue. For some it's too violent, but for me it's just right. I think it's one of the better James Bond films. So after a short period for Timothy Dalton, move on to GoldenEye. Now this was the point in the marathon when my eyes were drooping very much. I think I might have missed a tiny bit of GoldenEye as well, because I kind of I looked back at the screen again and it was on a completely different moment in the film. So yeah, I think I might have had a bit of shut eye for about half an hour at that point. But GoldenEye, good start for Pierce Brosnan. First Bond film in 6 years, so it was a big gamble, that one. They had to make sure that basically this was that Bond would work in the 1990s, and it did. I mean, lots of bums on seats, biggest box office since Thunderball, basically, for GoldenEye. Tomorrow Never Dies is always the film that again that divides people with Pierce Brosnan's Bond, but for me it's his most entertaining one. Lots of good elements in it. Bond in Germany as well, Bond back in Thailand again, first time since The Man with the Golden Gun, so yeah, it's good. And Michelle Yeoh is great as Wei Lin as well in that film. Again, the weak part is the villain. Jonathan Pryce plays a bit of really hams it up as Elliot Carver, and it's not a particularly memorable villain. The World Is Not Enough was the final James Bond film of the 20th century. It was the first film I went to see in the cinema as well, first James Bond film, back in 1999, which was the first year that I started getting into James Bond, because I remember starting to watch the films on TV in that same year. And it's okay. I mean, it's another sort of middle of the road Bond film. Nothing really amazing, but it's good. It's worth a watch. But then we get on to Die Another Day, which really is Pierce Brosnan's worst. It was a case of, 40th anniversary, big celebrations, let's throw in everything into the mix, and sometimes less is more. So, after that, 4-year gap to introduce a new James Bond. So Daniel Craig starts with Casino Royale, basically an origin Bond story, which, having watched it again in this marathon, I can understand why everybody raves about it. It's an excellent Bond film, and again, it's one in my top 5. Quantum of Solace follows that, generally considered the weakest of Daniel Craig's so far. The problem is the very quick editing in the film, and sometimes you can't actually understand the plot, which is a bit concerning in a James Bond film. You need to understand it. If you don't, then it's too complicated, and it doesn't work for Bond. Then, of course, the final James Bond film, Skyfall. Okay, and just a great one. Very good film, and I probably feel that way because it's still quite fresh in my mind, and fresh in everybody's mind, because it's just over a year old. But lots of new characters introduced. Q is back in the fold as well. First time he's been in one of the James Bond films for 10 years at that point. Moneypenny's back as well. Again, first time we've seen Moneypenny for 10 years, since Die Another Day. And of course we say goodbye to Judi Dench, spoiler alert. I mean, if you haven't seen Skyfall yet, go and watch it. And we have a new M by the end of the film as well. Great locations, Javier Bardem, a great villain, Silva, and yeah, just lots of classic moments in Skyfall, or what will soon be considered as classic James Bond moments, I think, in a few years to come. So I'm looking forward to the next James Bond film, the 24th official Bond film. Just must mention as well the two unofficial films that I watched as well, which were the 1967 Casino Royale with David Niven and Peter Sellers. Also Woody Allen is in that one as well, and Ronnie Corbett for some very strange reason. I'd never seen it all the way through until this marathon, and let's just say I won't be going out of my way to watch it again anytime soon. And also Never Say Never Again as well, which in many respects is more entertaining than Thunderball, which basically it's basically a remake of Thunderball. It was Kevin McClory's Bond film that was released in the same year as the official film Octopussy, and just goes to show that even with a big star like Sean Connery, if it's not an official James Bond film, it's not going to do as well. Let's put it that way. So generally the highs and lows with the Bond series. I know what my weakest ones are, the ones I don't like as much. Diamonds Are Forever is probably at the bottom of my pile, and at the top of the list, probably Skyfall, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, From Russia With Love, Casino Royale, and License to Kill, probably. I think they are probably my top 5 James Bond films. But it's debatable. I'm sure I'll change my mind again. Whilst I love James Bond, I wouldn't have done this if I didn't. It's not something that I'm going to rush and watch again anytime soon, because about 57 hours of James Bond actually is more than enough for anybody. So I'm going to be putting off watching James Bond again for a while, make it a bit of a surprise when I watch it again. Right, well, I'll sign off there, and that's basically my review of the Bond series as a whole. I just wanted to keep this video short. I know I've been running for about 20 minutes now, so I'm going to wind up by saying thank you to the guys online who supported me through this. Like I said, this wasn't for any kind of gain. It wasn't for raising money for charity or anything. It was just to see if I could do it, and if I could stay up for this long and be determined enough. And it goes to show that I must be quite a determined person to want to do it. So thank you to everybody that's followed the progress with the Ultimate James Bond Marathon, and you can join me again for another film marathon in 2014. I'm not sure which one it's going to be yet, but I'll keep you posted when I decide to do another one. Probably won't be for a while though. I need to recover from this one first. So happy Christmas to everybody, and Happy New Year, and see you in 2014.